When the wind carries the smell of rain and smoke, some say it brings back memories that never died, stories buried beneath ashes and hearts that refuse to forget. This is one of those stories. The story of Grace George. Before the world taught her pain, Grace knew only sweetness, the smell of warm bread, cinnamon, and sugar drifting through the small George Bakery, a little shop at the corner of Smith Mark Street. Her father, Mr. George, worked from dawn till dusking his hands rough. But his heart was gentle, and her mother, Annie, sang softly while she packed loaves for customers. They didn't have much, but they had peace. Mr. George laughed softly and spoke, Grace, one day, this bakery will be yours. You'll bake dreams, not just bread. Grace giggled childishly and said, I'll make the whole world smell like cake, Dad. And he believed her, because when Grace smiled, the world seemed possible. But across the street, Power watched. His name was Mr. Cole, a man whose wealth was built on ashes of other people's dreams. To him, that bakery was not a family's legacy, it was land, prime land, worth millions. Cole said coldly, this street will be mine. That bakery stands where my new plaza will rise. Maurice, Mr. Cole associate, said, but sir, the George won't sell. Cole laughed sarcastically, then they'll learn how small dreams burn. With this single line, he signed away a family's peace. It happened on a Sunday night. Grace was 12. The power flickered, then the smell of smoke, thick and bitter. By the time neighbors ran out, the bakery was already a storm of flames. Grace shouted amidst crying, Mum. Dad! Annie screaming, Grace! Stay back! The family barely escaped. Mr. George stood in the rain, staring at everything he'd built, melting in firelight. And on the other side of the street, Cole watched from his car, expressionless. A single tear slid down Grace's cheek. She would never forget that face. Mr. George tried to rebuild, but the world can be cruel when hope runs out. Within a year, he was gone, a heart too heavy for this world. Annie held Grace's hand at the funeral, her voice breaking, you must live, Grace. For him. For us. And Grace nodded, but deep inside something else was born. Not forgiveness, but something colder and sharper. Years passed. Grace grew, while others saw a quiet girl with tired eyes. Inside her, fire lived again. She studied accounting, business, and the art of numbers, the language of men like Cole. She watched from afar as his company, Cole Holdings, became a symbol of greed wrapped in glamour. And she whispered to herself, someday, you'll choke on every coin you stole. Annie saw more than ambition in her daughter's eyes. She signed deeply and said in a weak but proud voice, Grace, promise me you'll build, not destroy. Grace said softly, I promise. Mum, she paused, but sometimes destruction is how you rebuild. At 24, Grace walked into Cole Holdings not as a victim, but as a recruit. Quiet, brilliant, unnoticed, just as she planned. And that's where she first met him. Daniel Cole, the son of the man who destroyed her family, charming and kind. Completely unaware that the woman smiling at him was planning to burn everything his father built. Daniel laughed gently, you're new here, right? Grace, isn't it? Welcome to the family. She smiles faintly and said, thank you, sir. It's an honor. She meant it. It was an honor to stand this close to the man she would one day destroy. Daniel looked at Grace briefly. She was an epitome of beauty, slim talk, and there's something about her eyes that looks like a deep blue sea, very alluring. He liked her. It was love at first sight. He wanted to know more about Grace, so he intentionally extended a kind of friendship to her. During friendship, Daniel got to know more about her. Then he took a bold step and asked Grace out. After 3 months, she had been working in his father's company. Where love begins to blur vengeance, and Daniel Cole's world starts to crumble from within. Grace didn't plan to fall for him. She only meant to study him, learn his habits, his weaknesses, his father's empire through his trusting eyes. But he was not his father. He held doors open. He listened to her when she spoke. He laughed like someone who had never learned cruelty. And sometimes, when he looked at her, she felt the fire in her chest flicker, not with anger, but with warmth. Daniel smiled and said, Grace, you're calm, and at the same time strange. Everyone here is chasing power, but you just like work. I've learned power destroys those who chase it too hard, said Grace. He chuckled. You sound like you've seen it happen. Grace smiled but said nothing. Each day, Daniel drew closer, and each night, she wrote in a secret journal every transaction, every fake account, every hidden bribe his father's company had buried for years. Sometimes she'd visit the old street where the bakery once stood. The land was now fenced concrete and weeds, silent and waiting. She'd stand there, eyes closed, hearing echoes of her father's laughter through the wind and her mum's word, Grace, promise me you'll find peace, not revenge. She said softly to herself, I'm sorry, Mum. But peace died the night the fire lived. Cole is older, ruthless, but not unshakable. He'd noticed small leaks in his company's finances, rumors of audit checks, strange emails exposing corruption he thought buried. Who's behind this? Find them. Now roared Cole. He didn't know the enemy sat 2 doors away, smiling at his son, hiding a storm behind gentle eyes. Daniel couldn't resist Grace. He started waiting by her desk, bringing coffee, finding reasons to talk. One evening, they stayed late at the office, only them, the glow of the computer screens, and the hum of the air conditioner. Daniel broke the silence and asked, "Have you ever think of leaving this place? Doing something just for yourself?" Grace replied, "I can't leave until I finish what I came here for." "You sound like you're on a mission," said Daniel. Grace said softly, "I am." She didn't realize how much she meant it or how much he believed she was joking. When Daniel touched her hand, the piano in her heart trembled, half guilt, half longing. That night, she dreamed of fire again, but this time, Daniel was the one burning. Grace's plan was nearly ready. She had gathered evidence, secret accounts, fake land deals, bribe ledgers, enough to bury Cole forever. She sent them anonymously to the National Financial Bureau. The walls were closing in. Cole stood up from his chair in the office. He walked to and fro in his office, panting, as if he ran relay race, and shouted furiously, "Whoever you are, you're playing with fire." He didn't know the fire already had his name on it. Weeks later, Daniel invited Grace to dinner, his voice shaking in a way she'd never heard. "Grace, there's something I need to tell you. My father," he paused, "he's not perfect. There are things I've begun to uncover, and I think someone's coming for him. I don't want you caught in it." She stared at him, the irony cutting deep. Then Grace whispered, "What would you do if you found out someone close to you wanted your father to fall?" Daniel hesitated and said, I'd want to know why. And if he truly hurt them, maybe he deserves it." For the first time, she saw not the son of her enemy, but a man trying to choose between blood and truth. And that made her heart betray her cause. Grace tried to pull away, but Daniel wouldn't let go. He believed in her. He trusted her. And when he said he loved her, for one moment, she wanted to be that girl from the bakery again. Innocent, free of revenge, and full of hope. Daniel said softly, "I don't care who you were before, Grace. I just care who you are now." But he didn't know the truth. He didn't know what was coming for his family. This is where truth, betrayal, and destiny collide. The following morning broke differently that day. Cole Holdings, the untouchable empire, was trembling. Officers from the Financial Bureau walked through its glass doors with files and warrants. News reporters crowded the gate. The king had been caught naked in his own castle. Cole screamed, "Who leaked these documents? Who dares?" Board member answered nervously, "They came from inside. Sir, someone with access to your private accounts." And Cole's eyes turned cold, searching, calculating. They landed on one name, Grace George. Grace sat in her small apartment that night, watching the news replay Cole Holdings under investigation for fraud and illegal land seizures. Her father's face came to mind, smiling through flour and sweat. She whispered through trembling lips, "Dad, I did it." But victory came with silence, not joy, because the more she took from Cole, the more she risked losing the one person who had unknowingly given her peace, Daniel. Daniel had spent the day defending his father in the press, refusing to believe the evidence until he found her laptop. The screen was still open. Files, spreadsheets, anonymous email drafts, all bearing one name, Anderson Cole. Daniel whispered shakenly, "No, Grace, what have you done?" His hands trembled as he scrolled, each line a dagger: dates, bribes, land seizures, and at the end, a note addressed to herself: "When the empire burns, the Gorge name will rise again." Daniel George. Grace George. That night, Daniel came to her apartment soaked from the rain, eyes red. Not with anger, but heartbreak. Daniel said frighteningly, "Your name, your father's bakery, Grace. You were never here for me. You were here for him." Grace responded softly, "I was here for justice." Daniel voice break, "You destroyed my father's life." Grace tears falling, "He destroyed mine first. He burned my father's bakery, Daniel. He watched us suffer. He killed him not with a gun, but with greed." Her voice cracked through the rain, each word slicing through Daniel's heart like lightning. He stepped back, disbelief in his eyes and pain that cut deeper than any betrayal. Daniel whispered, "I loved you." Grace responded in a broken whisper, "And I loved you too. That's what makes this the hardest thing I've ever done." The next morning, Daniel went to see his father. The mansion felt colder, emptier, guards whispering, phones ringing, empire collapsing. Anderson Cole angrily said, "You came to see the end, Daniel? The vultures are eating what I built." Daniel said sternly, "No, father. The vultures are only cleaning what you destroyed. You took that bakery from a man named George. You burned his life down. Cole snaps, I did what I had to do. Daniel remanded him firmly, no. You did what your greed wanted. And now, I have to live with your sins. For the first time in his life, Cole saw something he'd never seen in his son disgust. Days later, the verdict came. Cole Holdings dissolved, assets frozen and properties seized. Mr. Cole was arrested for fraud and arson conspiracy. Reporter News Clip announces that the once mighty real estate mogul Cole faces up to 25 years in imprisonment. Grace watched from the crowd, her expression calm and eyes unblinking. Daniel stood beside the police van, his face pale with conflict. When Cole saw her, recognition struck like lightning. The girl from the fire. The ghost of his sin. He said nothing. He only bowed his head as they took him away. After the trial, Daniel found her again. Not in anger, but in exhaustion. He stood on the same street where the bakery once stood, now quiet and reclaimed by Grace. You bought it back? Asked Daniel. Grace nodded yes. It's mine now. My father's. Maybe someday I'll build it again. Daniel said, you got your revenge. Grace replied, no, Daniel, I got my father's peace. Daniel looked at her, the woman who had destroyed his father, and somehow rebuilt herself from ashes. Daniel said, I don't know if I can forgive you. Grace responded, I don't expect you to. Just remember I never hated you. He nodded, eyes wet. They stood in silence, as the wind carried the scent of rain and forgiveness neither of them could name. Love, revenge, justice. They are different words for the same fire. And once you start the blaze, you can never control what it burns. Months passed. The headlines faded. Cole Holdings was nothing but a memory, a ghost in newspapers and courtroom records. Grace George no longer hid. She spent her days walking through the burnt soil that once held her family's bakery, the same ground where she'd lost everything, and where, somehow, her story began again. The wind no longer smelled of fire. It smelled like rain, flour, and forgiveness. Brick by brick, she rebuilt the bakery. Not a grand plaza. Not a monument of revenge. Just a simple shop, warm, open, alive. Construction worker cheers and asked Madam Grace, the signboard's ready. What name should we paint? Grace smiles faintly. She taught for a while and answered, George's Hearth. One of the construction workers asked why hearth? Grace explained, because a hearth is where fire belongs, not to destroy, but to keep others warm. And for the first time in years, she smiled without pain. The ghosts had gone quiet. One evening, as the sun began to fade, she heard a familiar voice outside. Grace was strolling around her bakery when she hears a family voice from behind. She paused her steps but didn't turn back. She wasn't sure if she heard well or daydreaming. Daniel coughed to announce his presence. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. Grace turned with a gentle smile. You came. Daniel, I saw the sign. George's Hearth. It's beautiful. He looked different, older, quieter, wearing the kind of sadness that teaches humility. Daniel, my father died last month in prison. He left a letter. For you. Hesitantly, Grace asked, for me? For me? He handed her the envelope. Grace trembles while reading. To Grace George, I do not ask forgiveness. But I see now what I destroyed. You built what I never could. Truth. May your fire never fade. Anderson Cole. She folded the letter, her eyes wet not from hate, but something deeper. Grace cried softly, I never wanted him to die. Just to understand. Daniel, he did because of you. The morning the bakery reopened, the whole street came alive. Laughter, the smell of bread, and cake, the sound of children playing. Even Daniel was there, helping her set up chairs outside. You know, you never told me you could bake. Grace smiling, I had to remember. It's what my father taught me before the world changed. Daniel, and after all that's happened, you're still giving warmth to people. Grace looking at him, I learned something, Daniel. Revenge burns everything, even the one holding the match. But forgiveness rebuilds from the ashes. He smiled, not as the son of Cole, but as a man who had finally found peace standing beside. That night, as the lights dimmed and the last loaf was sold, Grace stepped outside, looked at the stars, and whispered into the night. Dad, we're home. In that moment, she realized the fire had not been her enemy. It was her test. And from it, she had forged something stronger than vengeance, grace itself. Sometimes life steals everything we love, not to punish us, but to see what will become in the ashes. Grace George became a flame that purified, not one that consumed. And Daniel Cole, a son who chose light over legacy. The world forgot the scandal. But on one small street where a bakery once burned, A new story rose from smoke and sorrow, proof that even after the darkest fire, love and forgiveness can still rise.